Welcome to HDTV. You now rocking with your boy. Now, basically, I had a subscriber, my big dog, asked me to do something on Len Bias, and the subscriber, of course, man, he's real cool. He's really been there for me. Love and success follows me. Um, Great dude, very smart and intellect. So basically, Len Bias was supposed to come in and basically change the landscape of the Boston Celtics, and a lot of people felt like if he would have came, he would have he would have stopped he would have stopped a lot of the he would have basically stopped the Bulls from really getting that first three-peat. Um, a lot of people say that, but to me, Len Bias was to me. I think if you would have paired him with Reggie Lewis, then yeah, they would have had something there because Reggie Lewis used to give Jordan problems. Len really didn't guard Michael like that. And then when they guarded each other, he would either do something and then Mike would do some on the other end. But to say that Len Bias was better than Mike was nah. Mike was still better because of how he handled it. But both of them in college, they really weren't guys who can go left. They were better when they went right. When they went left, they would most likely shoot or they would pass the ball. But when they went right, they would put a move on you. Like Mike could do a spin and then end up back in near the basket and lay it up with the right, or he'll do it with the left. Len would do the same thing. Len would go right. He would kill you. He would drop step and then throw the ball up. And then he had a great mid-range shot. Now that's one thing about Len Bias. Len Bias could hit that mid-range shot, and he was athletic. But Len Bias to me, if he would have made it to the league, he would have been good. I don't know if he now if he would have got his game polished up. I think when he went to the Celtics, I think Bird would have worked with him and others would have worked with him, and Len probably would have been a formidable starter, maybe a solid starter. But for me, watching his clips and watching some of his games, I just didn't see that he would have been a very big superstar or would have been the best like that. He would have been good, but I don't see jumping off my screen like when I saw Larry Johnson or when I saw Sean Kemp, like when Sean was coming out of high school, like that type of impact. I didn't see that. But he was good. Len had some dunks, he had some things. He would have had to work on his game a lot. He had a good post game. He was very he was more fundamental. He had more fundamentals than a lot of guys his size had. So he was able to do some things at the small forward. He really wasn't a guy who would handle the ball. He was more off the ball, and he was very tough. But in one of these articles I pulled up, is from USA Today. It was written June 26, 2020. Um, and it's from Jeff Zilgit. He's talking about the opinion the Len Bias story remains one of the saddest what ifs in sports history. And while doing research on Michael Jordan's The Last Dance, I came across a photo that sidetracked my progress. It was a photo of North Carolina Tar Heels Jordan guarding Maryland Terrapins Len Bias, a matchup many thought would extend into the NBA for at least a decade. That never happened. Boston selected Bias with the number 2 pick in the 1986 draft, and not even 2 full days later, Bias was dead from cocaine intoxication, collapsing in a Maryland dorm room while partying with friends. He was 22 years old. It's the cruelest thing I've ever heard. Then Celtic star Larry Bird told Sports Illustrated. For me, it was a remember where you were moment. I learned it from AM radio. Today, it would have trended on Twitter. In the parking lot of my high school, just as our summer league basketball team took off for a game at Detroit's famous St. Cecilia's gym. Bias' brother, Jay, was also 16 and playing summer league ball in Hoop Ridge, Prince George County, Maryland that month. Bias' story represents one of the saddest what ifs in sports history. What if Bias had not died and instead had a long NBA career? Not saying he would have been better than Michael Jordan, but let Jay Bias, who played against Bias, have a word. He was Superman in a basketball uniform, Bias said on a recent ESPN retrospect on Bias. He was an extraordinary player. I believe he was headed toward Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame status. He would have been, had he played in the NBA, a perennial all-star and would have been a challenger. I'm not saying he would have been as good as Jordan, but he would have been a challenger. Bias had explosive quickness and leaping ability, finished at the rim with power, and possessed a jump shot with touch that would have improved the NBA. He is one of 10 players to win multiple ACC Player of the Year awards, is the only player to average 25 points and 10 rebounds in the NCAA tournament since seeding began in 79. According to ESPN and Bias, not Jordan was named the 1984 ACC Tournament MVP. Bias was destined for stardom in the NBA and for one of the league's best franchises. In hindsight, the Celtics championship era of that time was coming to an end when they drafted Bias. The Celtics beat Houston in '86 finals and lost to the Lakers in the '87 finals. Then were pushed aside by the Detroit Pistons and Bulls in the following seasons as the Celtics aged. But Bias would have made the Celtics younger and could have likely would have altered that power structure to some degree. He was that good. Maybe he prevents the Lakers, Pistons, and Bulls from winning more titles. Maybe the '87 Celtics beat the Lakers in the finals. As Bird suggested, those are cruel what ifs. That 1986 draft class had its troubles. Number 3 pick Chris Washburn entered a drug rehabilitation center in '87 and received a lifetime ban from the NBA after failing 3 drug tests. Number 6, William Bedford's drug problems thwarted his NBA career, and number 7 pick Roy Tarpley received a lifetime ban for violating the league's anti-drug and alcohol policy. And for the Bias family, tragedy struck again in 1990 when Jay Bias was shot and killed. As dark and painful those tragedies were, their mom, Lonis Bias, tried to make sure their deaths were not in vain. She became a motivational speaker and life coach, preaching a message of hope, courage, and endurance. So that whole draft class basically, was very troubled. I mean, they were very troubled. They all had drug problems, but Len Bias, man, Len Bias, I saw him. He could have been an all-star, I believe, but I didn't see him transcending the game. Like when I saw Mike in college, when you watch Mike in college, Mike was amazing. Even though he wasn't the greatest college player, I still would give that to either Kareem or Wilt Chamberlain. But excuse me, Kareem. You could go Wilt. Did Wilt play all four? I don't know if Wilt played all four, but you could say Kareem. It's a lot of guys played college. It's hard to keep up. Grant Hill was good too in college. So, but I didn't see that. Like with Grant Hill, I knew Grant Hill was gonna be a superstar just by when he stepped on the court, his swagger, his ability to control the game as well as play off the ball. He can get guys involved, and Hill can make some big shots. Um, Len could too, man, but it's just that Len to me, he needed more polish to his game. He was very stiff, but he can go right and he was able to pivot. He had a good post game. He would have had a good post game coming into the league, which you don't see now with a lot of young players. They don't have the footwork. He had some footwork for his size, and he could rebound, because he was a forward. So you could put him at the stretch four, you could run him at the three. So he mainly was a three, but he could play the stretch four. So to me, the biggest what if story would have been that if he could have got with those Celtics, I believe the Celtics would have been formidable for years to come. And then you had Reggie Lewis who died on the court while playing. But if Reggie Lewis, could have if Reggie Lewis could have played and they would have been together. Now Reggie Lewis gave Jordan problems. Lewis was kill on that court. So that would have been to me, I think Reggie would have been that guy, and then Len would have been a great number two with him, and then Len probably could have potentially became a number one through his years of playing. But Len Bias, man, would have been a good player, solid starter. Hall of Fame, he probably could have made it if he worked on his game some more, but he had a good mid range shot. He was good in the post. He could pivot, get to that right. If he goes right, him and Michael were kind of similar in their game. The only difference is Mike was a little more skilled and polished, and he had a way more array of moves when he was around the basket than Lynn had. So he wouldn't have been better than Mike, you know, but he would have been a good opponent. I could see Lynn could have impacted the game. He could have been to me a better um what's that guy name? Hold on. He would have been a better Corliss Williamson. A way better. But I'm trying to think of the other guy um who played. I'm trying to see if that's him because I'm getting him mixed up with somebody. Because I'm trying to think of the guy. Man, what's that guy name? He was a decent player too. Man, I cannot think of that guy name. If I could remember that guy name, I cannot remember that player's name. But yeah, Len Bias man was a good talent. He was a great talent. He could have been more. It's sad to see him go, but he could have been like a Glenn Robinson. He would have been a little better than Glenn. Like he was more athletic. He could have did more. He could have been like a Glenn Robinson who could play both sides. Could have been he was sort of like a tweener. You could put him at the stretch four. You can put him. He's a solid three, but you can also play him at the stretch four. So let me know in the comment section what you think. Do you think Len Bias would have been a superstar? Do you think he would have transcended the game? Me, I don't think he would have. I mean, he was a great talent. He had some moves. He had some fundamentals. He was very, very tough to guard. But I just believe that if he worked on his game some more, he could have been great. I just don't know if he would have been better than Mike. He wasn't on Mike's level. Mike was something else. Mike, you could tell when you saw Mike play that Mike was gonna be special. But you didn't know he was gonna be like the greatest ever and all that. But let me know in the comment section what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And if you want to donate to the page, Cash at me at Harry2, which is Harry, and then the number two. And Like I said, man, we out. Live boy.